In a stunning turn of events, Nico Iamaleava turning to the transfer portal. Does that mean Deshaun Foster should go make a big splash when the portal opens? Let's think about that one.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Thanks for tuning in. This episode, where we get started, UCLA. We've talked a lot of transfer portal stuff with the men's basketball team, what's going on with the women's basketball team. And, you didn't think the portal opening pretty soon for football in the spring window, that Deshaun Foster and UCLA would have their names thrown right into the middle of the biggest recruit potentially heading in, which is Nico Iamaleava. Well, this is a guy who, after a holdout with Tennessee, wanting and trying to negotiate more NIL funds for him personally, Tennessee said, you can go kick rocks, Rocky Top, no? And then finds himself looking to the portal to go find a new home. Why is this a thing? Why is UCLA's name being thrown out from the likes of ESPN, from CBS Sports, where this is a SoCal kid looking for a new college home? Well, one, UCLA is riding with a super senior quarterback right now with Joey Aguilar, okay? He is a guy that's utilizing that extra year from JUCO, and after that, there's not a clear-cut number one to take over after him. If you bring in a guy like Nico, you have somebody who has led his team to the playoff, with 3 years of eligibility left, although if he has a splendid season after this year, could go to the portal again, he could go to the NFL draft, many options for Nico. What makes this situation so interesting for UCLA is this is the type of guy you want to go after, all right? Somebody who is holding out during spring workouts, if you will, spring football practice, which is what guys do in the NFL, and we haven't seen to this point until now in college football. Is this the guy you want to change the entire landscape of college football spring practice, what all these coaches were worried about by canceling their spring football game? It didn't even matter. It didn't even take a spring game for this to happen. It took NIL and greed, not necessarily on Nico's part, but overall finally working its way down to the players for it to have an impact. Now, UCLA could, in a sense, find its future quarterback, a guy who last year obviously had better numbers than Ethan Garbers. When you're trying to look from year to year, this year UCLA has a gunslinging quarterback in the likes of Joey Aguilar, a guy who could throw it all around and find his receivers, but also is a little turnover prone. Let's take a look at Nico's numbers from his full season last year as the true starter. Threw for a total of 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His mobility, certainly not in question, ran for 358 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns, and you're like, okay, this is cool. But in the biggest game of the season, you saw this guy against the champions, the reigning national champions now of Ohio State, went to Columbus because the first round CFP games were at home site, so they went to Columbus to the Volunteers, and Nico put up 104 yards passing, 47 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns, with no touchdowns throwing, no interceptions, and he was sacked 4 times. Now, as we saw, Ohio State, for the most part, just overwhelmed the field and dominated. And unlike the majority of these teams in the CFP, Tennessee had to go to the horseshoe. So you could argue maybe that was doomed from the start in an 8-9-ish matchup for Tennessee going to Ohio State. So maybe you think, okay, Nico with a young offensive coordinator like Tino Sunseri, that could be a fun pairing. What makes this dynamic so intriguing for UCLA, right? The SoCal ties for the kid from Warren who went to Long Beach Poly back to Warren, is that the highest rated recruit for the longest time in this class for UCLA at the quarterback position was literally Nico's brother Madden. And we all remember how that played out. On signing day, with UCLA with so much coaching turnover, with so many, their top 3 guys all signing elsewhere, including Madden, I believe at Arkansas at the moment, or that's where he signed on signing day, to get away from UCLA, you're thinking, okay, obviously Madden and Nico are 2 different guys. They're 2 different players, and from my intel, Nico is the much better of the 2, the older one with experience on a playoff team so far in the SEC. That should make its heyday at UCLA in the Rose Bowl in the Big Ten, all right? We're not discussing talent. But how it played out, wanting more money, leaving your team just a few months prior to fall workouts, heading into the season, into fall camp, that just leaves Tennessee high and dry. And if you're UCLA, you go after a guy who's commanding as much as potentially $4 million in the NIL. You're like, we've already played this game with your brother, with your family, with your quote-unquote brass, your team, your agents of sorts, right? And we already lost this battle. And that was a younger brother who could have had a chance to start immediately. Now, there's probably more behind the scenes that I don't know, you don't know. We just don't know about what Madden's decision-making, whether it's more NIL, a different opportunity, the switching of coaches and the offensive coordinator from Bieniemy to Sinceri. There's so many things, so many factors at play. Now, does UCLA have a budget to go after somebody like this? If they're even to try, if Deshaun Foster's like, red flags aside, let's go after somebody like Nico, who would be a game changer, all right? There's no denying that if UCLA goes out and says, Nico, we can make it or get close enough to your demands, whatever you're asking, we'll make it happen. I know that will send a shockwave through the rest of the UCLA fan base. That would absolutely draw some people away from wanting to watch this team. Like, hey, I don't know if I like this. We already dealt with this with Madden. Some of the SoCal folks already know what it's like to deal with them in the high school ranks, the Iamaleavas. But this is a guy who comes in and would instantly, I don't know if it would be stability, but provide a youth infusion to the quarterback position and potentially give them a quarterback for at least 2 seasons. With the portal and NIL and the NFL draft, all options for Nico, there's no guarantees. You could pay $4 million a year for 2 years. It's not necessarily going to happen. But after Joey Aguilar, you don't really have there's a bunch of quarterbacks. And while spring practice is going on, we're not going to know until the pads come on, until something changes as who is the 1B at quarterback. All right. With Nico available and UCLA's name being thrown in there with USC, with Notre Dame, let's look at those other options. USC, of course, with Lincoln Riley, they've got their quarterback, right? They had a quarterback last year, and then they went with the younger option by the time the UCLA-USC game was played, and now Jaden's their starting quarterback. If Lincoln wanted to make a splash, certainly they had the money and the funds to do so. Notre Dame, after they made their run in the CFP, maybe they could go do something like that. But UCLA is in a unique spot. If they want to make a statement, if Deshaun Foster's like, okay, forget all of this, let's make a statement. We're going after Nico. Go do it. And prove that UCLA is not going to be the butt of all the jokes in college football. All right, you can go watch Locked On Big Ten Squad, overrated, underrated. It's a low win-loss total. I'm not sure how much Nico would move the needle heading into a new offense, having to learn a new system with a new coaching staff, with, as we can say, a subpar offensive line from last year heading into this season. There's a lot of question marks for him. But the Bruins want to make a splash and say, hey, we can go get Donovan Dent in men's basketball. We can construct a big-time roster in women's basketball and in football, where there's a lot of money to be made, an entire Rose Bowl to be filled. UCLA already proved a couple years ago they had the funds to go at least tempt Dante Moore to push away Oregon for a year. Now, the play and how it all worked out, the coaching staff and the players changed things, and it didn't necessarily work out. But UCLA swung and missed a couple of seasons ago. Deshaun Foster saw how that played out, and I wonder, does he want to play that game with the super senior quarterback who he's not tied to for more than a year? Or does he want to go and say, hey, let's make this happen? But they've already played this game with this family, with his brother. I'm not sure that this is the move you want to make. Obviously, they're 2 different kids, 2 different players, 2 different, entirely different situations, right? But what does that mean for the Bruins? I think a unique situation is more the ripple effects. If Nico does find a home, then the next team's going to need a quarterback, right? Like Tennessee or whoever finds a new quarterback. Maybe it trickles all the way down to somebody makes a phone call to Joey Aguilar and says, oh, what if we need you as a quarterback, right? This team gets a quarterback, then they all start losing I don't know. Maybe Joey Aguilar gets a call with a transfer portal opening and he decides to go somewhere else and doesn't like this offense. That's something that could potentially happen, but I'm not entirely sure. That's no intel. That's no insider information. That's just something that could happen with something super shocking, super wild, heading into the opening of the spring window for the transfer portal season in college football. And UCLA's name has been thrown around multiple times by multiple outlets, and I'm not sure if this is the right move to make. Discipline, respect, enthusiasm. Would Nico respond to those three pillars? And would this situation fit the pillars of Deshaun Foster? Or for a guy that isn't known much for his words, can his actions make the much bigger statement by signing a quarterback that could have $4 million potential, more or less, in NIL funding, and tell the rest of the country, we're here to play, let's roll? That would be the biggest statement of all. Now, is it the right one? I don't think so, especially with how it already played out with the Iamaleavas. I just do not think so. But only time will tell, and it would be an instant jolt, an instant lightning into the UCLA fan base. That would make a lot of noise, and it would be fun to talk about. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now when you join FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. And hey, FanDuel, it makes betting super easy, whether you're picking your favorite team, diving into the player props such as from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has many ways to bet for your favorite player props. And even after the game tips off, you can combine those live props into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head out and check out FanDuel.com to claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That's going to do it for this shortened edition of Locked On UCLA. Tell me your thoughts. Is Nico the answer? Is he not? Is this a terrible potential decision for UCLA and Deshaun Foster, or is it an easy one? Don't answer the phone or don't even pick it up. Tell me what you think. We'll see what happens and how that affects UCLA in any way, whether it's Nico or the portal opening in general for college football. Because spring practice is going on, and imagine if you're trying to go after a new number one quarterback when you've been running around with a current number one that you have for a year, rental, if you will. It's fascinating. So stick with Locked On UCLA. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Tell me your thoughts. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.